Shanti, welcome to those of you who are able to join me live, and greetings to those of you tuning in later on through the YouTube video. These BK Chit Chats have been going since the first wave of COVID when we went into lockdown. And of course, we all migrated online. People who didn't know what Zoom was began to learn what Zoom was. And it became a place of sustenance for all of us. And the idea behind these chit chats was really just to give some sort of a forum for people to ask questions, share some thoughts, gain some clarity. And so that's what these are. So if you've not joined before, welcome to you. And you're welcome to join us live as well through Zoom. But otherwise, we'll put the recordings up on the YouTube video. You can always send questions later in through WhatsApp as well. And the things we talk about here, they're more exploratory. So sometimes we'll refer back to a morally, sometimes we're sharing different stories, but we've got some experienced people in this call as well. So generally we can provide, I think, some clarity on some points. So that's the idea here. But no question is too silly. Sometimes, you can realize after a while that you didn't understand a point, but then you don't have the courage to ask it within your own morally class, but you can ask it here. There's no question too small. So I wonder if any of you who are with me live would like to get us started today.
Shanti, hearing the dogs. In today's movie, it often comes up, and I've always contemplated on this point of giving sorrow and not taking sorrow, not giving sorrow, not taking sorrow. And we more or less know what not giving sorrow means, understanding the karmic accounts, souls, understanding not to create. And Baba has also been talking, about the stains on the soul. You don't want to create more stains, also getting rid of those stains. But the taking of sorrow, because sometimes it comes so unexpected, and mostly it is with the karmas of souls, that when it comes, you for a moment, at least for me, for a few moments, it doesn't stay for long, because I use Baba points of knowledge and I understand what it does to the soul. And this cycle of give and take will continue in taking sorrow. But sometimes the sorrow comes in such subtle ways that you're not even aware that you're creating sorrow within the self. Sometimes you feel a little bit down and your energy drops. So my thing is that what do I do to protect myself from taking sorrow? I know it is the power of accumulation, remembrance of Baba, and it's the power of the soul. My take on it, I am thinking, is that when I churn knowledge, when I understand this cycle, when I go through this, Baba's always talk about spinning this cycle. So apart from not taking waste, but understanding the deep philosophy of karma. And for me, is really at this point in drama to be such a soul that nothing should bring me down. I should be so guarded that my thoughts doesn't allow me, because thoughts is a big deal, that doesn't allow me to go into that direction. So as I'm saying, for me, it is not always instantaneously. There are times when, but I do step back. It doesn't take me long to say this is drama, because my thing of the taking of sorrow is that I don't want to create more. So that stays with me. So it is how, and I shouldn't even be asking how do we do it, because I know, but and it's just your take on it, of this sorrow, giving and taking sorrow.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic to churn upon. as you say, some of it is just a journey, and a lot of Baba's points like this, I feel, are benchmarks. How do we know where we are on our pilgrimage? And I think this is one of the big ones. This is an indicator that we've accumulated a great deal of light and might, which is what Baba was asking us last Sunday. And so I think those are the ways, like what he was explaining to us on Sunday was, have you accumulated the 8 powers? And then are you using them? Because that then becomes your might. So last week's Murlis were quite a lot on this emotional maturity, this emotional power. Now, I think over time as well, I'm understanding this point better. Usually, everyone in the world, every religion would teach, don't give sorrow. And they will give some sort of rationale for that. And there'll be different slogans connected with that. And I think there are probably quite a lot of people who live by that. But the challenge for us is that Baba's just put a comma, not a full stop. And he said, don't take sorrow either. So that's the bit. The first bit we get, don't give sorrow. The second bit, though, is the bit that's the challenge for the yogi. Because a human being wouldn't be able to do that. Because to be human means to feel. It means to have those emotions. But as Baba was explaining to us this morning, he was explaining to us last Sunday, you're going to have to keep the deities in front of you. You're going to have to keep the angels in front of you, and you're going to have a concept of yourself as a deity, yourself as an angel. And if you look at yourself that way, then it makes much more sense about what Baba is. If I just look at myself as a human being, then it will seem impossible that I could not take sorrow, because that's what human beings do. But Baba's saying that actually look at yourself as an angel. What does it mean to have angelic qualities, deity qualities? And I think this is one of them. And it was just last week, I was hearing a radio program on the BBC around, it was a psychologist explaining something about something. I think it was a program on memory, actually. And the psychologist was explaining that how human nature works is that we want others to feel what we're feeling. And they were explaining this is how bullies are formed. You know, a bully has themselves at some point felt insecure, has felt afraid. And why they've developed this facade, this demeanor, this approach, it's not really them. Like quite a lot of bullies, they can be quite sensitive souls actually inside. And I used to work with a lot of children who were in the children's services care system, all sorts of issues. And you see, once attachments are broken and you've had all sorts of emotional damage, and when you're in an institution, you're not really getting that personal care, that relationship care that you need. So you find that a lot of their behaviors at school are bad, and they're the ones that will get expelled. They're the ones who'll get in trouble with the police. But why? You know, those behaviors, and they're trying to make others feel what they're feeling. And when I heard that last week, I thought of this point as well in the morally, that, you know, it makes much more sense. If what Bab is saying, if you take sorrow, you will give it, because this is human psychology. You will want others to feel what you're feeling. And even if we, as Brahmins, we don't do that very overtly, but we might do it like Brahmins can also be each other's like enemies in a way, like someone is trying to make effort, and the Brahmin is trying to put them down. Who are you to do that? Because they don't feel they can. And maybe they've got some low self-esteem. And they're thinking, why have you got self-esteem? Why have you got self-belief? I don't believe I can do it. Who are you to have belief? And so on. One of the things that, of course, Baba has done is he has focused upon the power of the sisters. And he talks about this in the Muralis, that after Brahma Baba went, many people on the outside thought the daddies wouldn't be able to work together because famously, infamously, women are other women's worst enemies. And that goes back through time, through the centuries, because of jealousies and so on, because that's what you're feeling. So you want the other person to feel that as well. So that made a lot more sense to me there, that what Bab is saying to us is become aware firstly of what your sorrows are, and you're on this journey of mastery here. And he says, first of all, don't give the sorrow. So start with that one. So you will have sorrow, which is accumulated inside of you for 63 births. But now begin to use Baba's knowledge and Baba's yoga to make sure you're not giving the sorrow first. But then there's also a journey, which is where we don't take sorrow anymore. Now, part of our process of around transformation is linked with memory. And when Sister Jayanti was with us at Birmingham University a couple of weeks ago, she did a meditation commentary. And there was one line in that commentary which I haven't taken up with her, but I did note in my own mind. And she said, she was talking about I'm controlling my thoughts in this space as a soul, I'm controlling my feelings. But then she added in, I also control which memories I emerge. And you see that, because I had been thinking about that as well. And we've had a number of Muralis this year around self-sovereignty, controlling power, ruling power. This has been a big theme. And as humans, we can't control memories, can we? So that BBC program I was listening to, it was on this theme of memory and what psychologists or psychotherapists they will try and do is help people who, like, the memory is not the problem, but they're explaining that certain people, the memory is connected with emotions. So people can get so overwhelmed by emotions. It can be fear, it can be pain, it can be many other things. So when Sister Jayanti was saying that as well, I had been thinking about that this year in this topic of ruling power and controlling power, that this connection with memory. And what Baba does is he works on this theme of memory by giving us this practice of spinning the discus of self-realization. And he always says to us that you've got to work on your smriti. Now, the 18th January morning it tends to use this language because in Hindi, the word smriti means remembrance. So 18th January in Hindi is called Brahma Baba Remembrance Day, Smriti Divas. But the other translation for smriti is also memory. So we heard that 18th January Murali about 4 Sundays ago from the year 2000. And Baba was saying on that it's very different for you as Brahmins, because when people have these death anniversaries, so many memories and emotions emerge within them. But for you, you think about Brahma Baba in a totally different way. You're thinking about becoming like him. You're thinking about his virtues and his qualities. And it's very different. So he was saying for you, the Smriti Divas is actually Samarthi Divas. That Samarthi means power. And it's very interesting how Baba gets us to use memory to create power, isn't it? So the other translation for Smriti, so the same word Smriti means remembrance, it means memory, and it also means awareness. So Baba always tells us what's going on in your awareness. You know, Brahma Baba stayed in this intoxication the whole day, and Brahma Baba always looks at all of us with disappointment. He says, none of you have got the intoxication you should have. None of you have the happiness you should. Because he was just so happy. And Dedi Janki was like that as well. She was just like always excited and always intoxicated. And what they talk about is reaching a point where you're grinding the way Baba puts it, you grind your own ingredients and create your own intoxication. So you're decoupling your happiness from the world. Your happiness is no longer based upon things happening and people doing something or achieving something. But your happiness is based on your awareness. And I've heard classes from both the daddies. I've heard Daddy Prakash Mani talk about it, but I've heard Daddy Janki talk about this so many times. And when they're asked this type of question around tolerance or around sorrow, they all answer in the same way, because I think they'd all reached a point in their journey where they say, yeah, but happiness is my possession. So why would I let anyone steal that? And so it's this movement of the yogi away from receiving happiness to generating happiness. And so what Baba is saying is, children, now through knowledge, through remembrance, through awareness, you're going to have to create supersensory happiness. And that supersensory happiness, which Baba calls intoxication, it's like intoxication I see as like a higher level of self-esteem, like beyond self-esteem. So initially, we might not have self-esteem, so we got to work on that. And because we don't really have self-esteem, because in body consciousness, it's really just ego management. You know, it's not how we teach children, for example, is we want you to have self-esteem based on being good at things. Because in the past, for many centuries, your family background determined what you could be in your life. If you were born into a certain family, that's what you did. You were born into a carpenter family, you became a carpenter. You were born into something else, you became that. And what education aims to do is to break that no, you can rise up through education. So how we would teach children is you're not defined by who you are, your past, your relations. You're defined by what you can do and what you can know. You can become something. Now, that's good. You can see the positivity there. But from a yogi perspective, that is a problem for us as well, because we've become dependent on success. And so I've shared this with you many times, that I deeply searched within over many years, and I'm very convinced that the core sanskar of body consciousness is seeing ourselves in other people's vision. And if we break this, so much taking sorrow just disappears, because it's deeply ingrained within us, whether it's our parents' approval, teachers' approval, friends' approval, and so on. So we spend our lives really being defined by others. So a lot of this first step is just regaining self-esteem, taking it back into our own hands. My experience was that took me at least 10 years, good 10 years or more, just working on self-esteem and building that up. And what Baba does is he gives us different points of self-respect so that we can build our self-esteem differently. And he gives us different relations with him so that we are like experiencing a different type of mother and father, different type of teacher, different guru, different friend, and so on. So I was talking this morning about the relationship of husband and wife. And I tell you, I'm only just beginning to be able to do that one because I just feel it takes such a lot of self-esteem to be Baba's wife. I think some Brahmins would find it easier than others, but it's such a conditional one. It's like a really high standard. Can I match up to my husband? Can I be, like Baba was saying this morning, he is just completely pure eternally. So can I be on that level to be with him as an equal? And Mama and Baba achieved that. But I think it might be a journey for a lot of us to get there. So what Baba and Daddy Jenki used to say this, begin with the mother, begin with Baba as the mother, because you're going to need a lot of love to heal and get strong. The mother doesn't judge you as you are, what you are mine. So initially we might need that, just a lot of affirmation, reinforcement, this type of thing. So I think for an emotional journey, it's going to take a lot of healing and mending, but it's only Baba's knowledge and Baba's yoga that really can achieve this. Like I've seen Brahmins over the years, they go into psychology and psychotherapy and if that helps to some extent, okay, but I don't feel anything can work as well as yoga. I think ultimately that's the key, morally and yoga. So for me, it's been just immersing myself into that. And I know bits and pieces of psychology and bits and pieces of other things, but I just use it to complement the morally, like not really the other way around. And so my experience has been that does work and it does heal over time. And there's a morally that I do want to read with everyone at some point, which is, I'll have to think of the date. I think it might have been a 99 morally. And Baba's talking about these 4 levels of our subconsciousness. And it's a journey. So initially, everything that comes into our mind, it's like it's being written into stone. It's engraved. And what Baba's saying is that to get that out is nearly impossible. So he says to us in the morally, you became stone intellects in the Iron Age. And that's what is like we take sorrow and we feel it so deeply. And the thing about not giving sorrow, not taking sorrow, is actually a lot of our sorrow is connected with giving happiness, not with giving sorrow. So when you treat someone well and then they behave with you in a way that you don't expect, that will cause you more sorrow than someone who you expect to give you sorrow. When someone you feel a sense of belonging with, they suddenly are not there. That will give you more. Someone who you trust, they then let you down. That is more. So it's the happiness that causes more sorrow. It's not the sorrow. Like you're expecting someone to behave in a negative way, you won't take that much sorrow. But it's actually where we've given happiness and taken happiness. That's where we're most susceptible. And so what Baba does in Brahmin's journeys is initially he's connecting us with the Brahmin family because he wants to bring us from the old world. I remember Brother Atom Prakash giving classes on this back in the day in Madhuban that, Baba wants us to make us his. So the first few years of being a BK, Beba's really helping us out. He's making things easy for us as much as possible. And I think for most of us, we gain Baba's love through the family. It's not our own personal connection, and things take time to develop, but it's the Brahmin family that gives us that feeling of Baba, that sustenance, that nurturing, that purity. So we then will transfer our attachments from the old world into the Brahmin family. But then Brahmins will have a period when, because you're gaining that happiness from the Brahmins, the sorrow will also then come through that, because we become susceptible at that point. And that's usually where the real tests for a Brahmin come. And my observation is that it tends to be between 8 years and 15 years with Baba. And these are generalizations, but that's you tend to find the Brahmins going through their soul searching around that. And then the Brahmins who pass through that, they usually then just stay. And they just like stay forever till the end, because they've seen it. They've gone through the choppy ocean period, the difficult period. So a lot of our taking of sorrow is this discovery of where we became susceptible and we didn't realize it, because it was while we were giving happiness and taking happiness that we began to leave doors open and gates open. So to summarize, I think there's a cleaning of past sorrows and becoming aware that I must not now, because I might be even doing it unconsciously, but I'm wanting others to feel the sorrows I'm feeling, the powerlessness I'm feeling, the insecurity I'm feeling. Then secondly, there will be taking sorrow in the circumstances where I've been giving happiness and taking happiness. And that's where doorways have opened up without realizing. Oh yes, I was running through those 4 states of the mind. So the first one is the stone. And then what Baba's saying is, as your cleaning occurs and your yoga power develops, then you'll move to a point where it's like writing on paper. And the good thing about paper is you can erase it, but it leaves a mark. And that mark will remain in your mind of the sorrow you've taken. And then he said, the third level is where your mind becomes like water. And when you write on water, you see the mark only at the time that you're writing, and then it immediately disappears. Do you remember we had that morally maybe 3 Sundays ago, where Baba was saying that his observation is that we lack the power to erase and the power to merge. So again, these are indicators of where our yoga power has got to. And then he said the 4th level is when you become an angel. And he said, you're just riding on light and you can't see anything. And so this is when we know we're getting closer to our Karamatite stage, that there's no impact at all. So what these senior daddies used to say is like, happiness is our thing. It's mine. I'm not going to let you steal my happiness. So part of our self-control, our controlling power and ruling power as we move forward in this pilgrimage is, have I got control of my happiness? Have I got control of my self-esteem? Have I got control of my intoxication? Or are those still affected by other people? So do you want to come back on that?
That was quite deep and good. So I'm thinking really, as you're saying, It is our expectation, and it's usually from souls who we know who have relationships with, because somebody who's a stranger, they can do whatever and it will not affect us in the same way. So it is a form of attachment and expectation that is there. And I was listening to Gemini then this morning, with the Merlin, and the soul was indicating where they had their children bit. And you're saying, you know, sometimes we take sorrow, especially from someone within the yagya, maybe someone in authority or so. But, and I agreed with her, is that we are taking this sorrow because we see them in a certain way. But it has to be something within me, which is really an expectation of how the behavior should be. And as you're saying, it is really important to protect my happiness, and it should not be reduced because of someone else. And I feel that once we get really into our deep self-respect, that self-esteem, nobody will take that away. So a behavior of a soul, a fellow BK instrument soul, really you would understand that it is a journey, and I have to respond to that with my self-respect, and that nothing should really bring me down. I have to have the aim and objective firm in front of me, and this awareness that is there. So it is always about me. It's always about me. So that when I recognize that on that deep level, I will then see situations that's happening as helping me. And as you're saying, it's a test for me to gauge where I am and what I need to do further within myself. And by giving and taking of sorrow, I remember when I was much younger, I don't do it as much now. It was important for me not to even kill an ant. And I still struggle with that sometimes when we use a spray to get rid of mosquitoes and ants and stuff. And I know the Brahma is very thing with the karmas involved with even animals. And I am wondering, how can I have a balance where that is concerned, and hurting animals? You know, these small animals, not the bigger dogs and cats and things, it's a different thing, because I can see that soul is a life force that is there. But these small creatures that are there, and I look to destroy them, how do I deal with that within myself?
Let me come back to that one, but let me continue with something else then on that first bit about sorrow. You see, sorrow and memory. Like, the thing about sorrow and whether we're taking sorrow from others is sorrow itself becomes part of our identity. There's an assumption, I think, when Brahmins talk about this topic, that everyone would surely want to let go of sorrow. But this is not true. And one of the things about human nature is we become attached to our negative feeling. And so even within us Brahmins, one step of courage as we go along in this path is, am I willing to let go of the sorrow I've accumulated along my Brahmin life? And whether that's from someone senior or whoever. But quite often, we as Brahmins, we hold on to memory in that way. So the memory of certain Brahmins, and the way they've behaved and what they've done and whatever. And with all of us, our memory and our perception are always faulty anyway. And they're never 100% reliable. But a human being will rely on their own perception above everything else. And so we get attached to sorrows and troubles. And so we shouldn't also make the assumption that everyone wants to let go of sorrow. And so when Buddha is saying that, you let go You move on, you put a full stop, you erase, you merge. For Brahmins to do that, this is courage. This is also greatness. I actually don't think a majority of Brahmins do want to do this, in my observation. My observation is that Brahmins like to hang on to these things, and they will hold them like precious things. And then just look at others with that vision. But you might remember that we had those Murlis on newness. And Baba says that, today, what's your new vision for others? What's your freshness? What's your newness in yourself? And he says to us that it's only the newness in your sanskars that will bring about the new age. That what we do as Brahmins or as human beings generally is we get attached to sorrows. And it's on one side, we would encourage people to talk, because people who don't talk about their pain and they suppress everything. And in particular, I don't know if it's the same in your countries, but in the UK, we have a problem with men committing suicide. It's quite a lot higher. The statistics are quite a lot higher than with women, because women tend to talk to someone about something more naturally, whereas men tend to close up more. So they encourage people to talk. And I think on that side, for that, you can understand the motive there. It's a positive one. But when I listen generally to the culture we have created within society, people are talking a lot about sorrows and identifying with past sorrows, and their identity becomes, oh, I'm the person that was abused about this. I'm the person who experienced this tragedy. So there's an identification with that. Now, if it's a major trauma, that's one thing as well. But even with small sorrows, we can lock in our identity. So what happens is, with that person, I'm the person you wronged. And I will just be so stubbornly standing in that space that you wronged me. Do you remember? You behaved with me. And that person probably doesn't remember. But I remember. I'm going to remind you. And even if I don't tell you, I'm going to remind you with my eyes that I remember. So I think there's a journey here within this Brahmin path of being able to become big enough to let go of all of the memories and all of the experiences that I've accumulated during my Brahmin life as well. But not to underestimate that human beings' two deepest attachments are to their memories and to their beliefs. And if I, as a Brahmin, am willing to let go of these two, I am unique. I am unique. I am bringing something very new. And it is a breath of fresh air to the Brahmin family and also to the world. So let's constantly challenge ourselves in that way. That's certainly, this is part of why I'm sharing that this is what I'm doing. This is where my effort is. So these are the sorts of things I'm doing. Then your point about the insects is a tricky one, isn't it? I don't know. I don't think I am an example of this, but because these things can make us ill as well, and it becomes a trade-off. There's a point that comes in the Murli, and when it comes in the Murli, I'll record on it in more detail. But Baba describes the Iron Age as being when we're inside of Ravan's claws. And I just think this dynamics of the Iron Age, which force us to commit sins. no matter which way you turn. Like, for example, why are we all peaceful at the moment? Why are we living peaceably? Why are we able to be on this Zoom call? And the answer is because someone else is killing for us. Someone in the military is keeping our lives peaceful. Someone in the police is carrying a gun and keeping us safe. Right? This is Raven's clause. That in the Iron Age, we even call them UN peacekeepers. Right? And what that means is a battalion of the army is going to keep peace. So, let's even just you think about the language we're using. To keep peace in the Iron Age, you have to have big guns. You have to have bigger guns than you have to have a bigger bomb than the other person. So how are we not part of this? So what was Baba saying to us this morning? He was saying, you're going to have to see distraction. You're not going to be able to escape this. You're going to see it with your own eyes. And I think this is all part of our settlement. He was saying you're going to witness murders happening in front of you. You're going to see these things happening. And just imagine, like, if it happened so quickly, didn't it? Invasion of Ukraine, invasion of Gaza. It happened so fast. So these things can happen really, really quickly. And are we ready? So I think this is probably all part of this settling that we have to do. Because I don't know if we can 100% not have some burden of karma. We fly on a plane, we know we're damaging the environment. There's a percentage we're accumulating karmic accounts. Baba uses this type of language in the Morales as well. He says, in the Iron Age, every action is a sinful action. He says it very starkly. And you're thinking, because every action we perform is not a sinful action. But I think he might be meaning, collectively, that you just can't escape in the Iron Age. No matter you go and live in like the middle of the wilderness somewhere, and some big animal will come and eat you. You'll go and buy a gun, and it's just you won't. How do you escape this? So I don't think I got an answer for it, other than we got to make sure we're staying in yoga. So Baba says to us, you're going to have to remove the burden before it comes to you, transform from a crucifix to a thorn. But he doesn't say to us it'll be eliminated completely. He says it'll still come as a thorn. And thorns can be very, very painful. So I don't know if anyone has a better answer.
Shanti. While the discussion was going on, I was thinking desires have a lot to do with the giving and taking of sorrow. Even in situations, a situation comes up and you want things to be peaceful, you want things to be happy. It's not that way with the other person or the situation itself. So that desire is where we need to have full control, as Baba says, take the desire away from any situation. But it's hard to do that when you see negativity and you see harm or something that is not good happening, and you want things to be peaceful and happy. It's a desire. How do we get rid of desire? The deities not have desire in any form whatsoever. So that portion of it, I believe, if we don't have desires, we have no troubles.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And you reminded me, on Tuesday evening, the London Centre played one of Daddy Janki's classes. And the point that I remember from that class is she said, contentment is a very big virtue. And, it's something like there's one level of contentment which is based on fullness. So we've got to reach a point where we've absorbed so much from Baba that we're just overflowing, and there's this natural contentment. But as you're saying, there's also a contentment which is a virtue, where you're consciously, so even if your mind, like the mind just develops desires, doesn't it? It's just been in that habit for so many centuries, and it's looking outside, and we're comparing and looking, and the world is a world of creating desire as well. So it's an atmosphere of that. And even if you don't have a desire, someone is trying to tempt you into something or another. And Brahma Baba gave that example yesterday, didn't he? That he saw that film when he was a young man and suddenly thought, oh yeah, I think I do want to get married. And that, yeah, it doesn't take much. It just a desire that you didn't even have that thought before. And then you just see something and you gain the desire. So the mind is like that. And what Bab is saying to us is, can you use contentment as a virtue? Because your mind will need to be trained not to have desires or not to pursue desires. Otherwise, we know this, don't we, from our own families. We know this from so many other stories throughout history, how desire destroys everything. It's just like you think about your family's history and where there's conflict between people, where there's been tensions, there's definitely desires driving that. And then even if we look at world history, it's desires, isn't it? Desires are driving all of the different things happening. So absolutely, desire will destroy. And the first thing that goes is our own peace and happiness, right? Because we were fine. And then the desire, it eats away. Sometimes Baba calls desires like ants that just eat away inside of you. And jealousy and dislike, these are two products of desire, because we're constantly thinking about, why should this person have more than me? Why shouldn't I have that? But actually, that desire means I can never be happy, because all that will happen is I will get that next. For example, I will covet some sort of position. I then get that position and I want the next one, like that. It's something which I tell myself, and I think you have to consciously train your mind. Because this was back in 2013, and I was making a 10-year plan with Ranjan Bhatia. How should I do things with my career? I had a feeling I needed to go back and study, and I had that feeling for that. So I went and did my master's degree and PhD. And I remember thinking at that point that it's just such a big achievement if I could just do that. And then I thought, if I could have one world-class achievement in my life, that would be great. So I got to Oxford University and I did my PhD, and that's great. And just to achieve that much was, it's great. And then what happens is you get onto these career ladders, and then it's like, oh, is that all you've done? Do you want to become then this next person? And then what about this next level of it? And because our systems are created in that way, you can get lost into this feeling that it's got to always have more. And I can remember Brian Bacon telling that story in his SML trainings back in the day of like the florist who had a very successful shop, and then the business consultant comes into his shop and says, oh, this is such a great shop. I could help you grow your business. And so, well, what would you do? Like, you could have 2 shops, 4 shops, and you could really go around the town. And then what? You go around the county, the state, then right across the country. And then what? Well, then you'll have so much money, you could just sit back and relax. And the florist said, I'm doing that already. But, we can get caught because success is always the criteria of success is you've always got to try and be bigger than you are. You've got to always try and have more than you got in order to be considered successful. So I feel it's just training our mind all the time. It came in today's slogan, where Baba said that, can you be with all the facilities, the sadhana, and continue your sadhana, your spiritual endeavors? This is unlimited disinterest. So you can have those things, but if inside your mind there's just one desire and then another desire, this is not healthy. You've got to aim for satisfaction. Contentment and satisfaction are the basis of peace. So whatever is there, just be content with it and just be happy. You don't need to always do more and more. And then if you, from that place of peacefulness and satisfaction, you then want to try and do something, then you can. But it shouldn't be that this desire is driving you. And that's not good. That's not helpful. Good point. Would anyone else like to come in with anything? Okay, shall we finish with some meditation together? I'll speak a commentary. So I will play music, as you know, because it can sound very odd as it comes through a Zoom channel. But if you would like to play music on your end, you are very welcome to do that. And we always begin by becoming aware of our body and relaxing our body. And we gather our energy because our mind gets spread into our sense organs and into our environment. And we as yogis, we have to gather our mind. It's known as the power to withdraw. So the power to withdraw, this is the first step in yoga. So let's withdraw our mind from the drama. And then the second step is the power to pack up. And how we pack up is we focus our thoughts into our forehead and we visualize ourselves as a soul. And we remind ourselves of being the seed, the soul. How the brain is the roots, how the spine and the torso are the trunk, how the arms and the legs are the branches, how the fingers and the toes are the twigs. And I, the soul, am the seed of this tree of the human being. But our tendency is to stay in the expansion. Our tendency is to seek externally. But Baba reminds me that I, the soul, am already a master ocean. The Brahmin soul used to be a master ocean of love in the Golden Age. The Brahmin soul was a master ocean of silence in the soul. These sanskars are inside of him. They might have become buried under all of the accumulated sanskars and experiences. But as I take myself back to being a seed, I'm allowing myself to get in touch with those original sanskars, the inherent sanskars. I, the soul, am inherently silent. I, the soul, am inherently love. I, the soul, am the original bliss. And I've replaced all of this with seeking peace, seeking love, seeking happiness. So I guide my mind back to becoming still again, concentrating back on the seed. I tell my mind that I don't need to be a seeker anymore. My role of being a devotee is over. My role of being a human being is ending. I now have to become an angel and a deity. And an angel and a deity, these are gods and goddesses. They are full. They are bestowers themselves. And this can seem very odd for the mind because the mind has been so busy seeking fulfillment. It doesn't know any other way. So I say to my mind, practice being still again. Practice concentrating again. You think more is more, but actually more thoughts, more interactions, more possessions hasn't made me full. It's made me more empty on the inside. In spirituality, less is more. Fewer thoughts is actually the key to greater fullness. So I say to my mind, we're going to create a slow thought because you've become very practiced in thinking fast. But slowness is good. So slowly, I think, I am an eternal soul. I feel every syllable. I am an eternal soul. And let me dwell upon that word eternal. Let me hold that thought. Eternal. Yes, I'm really saying to myself that I am an eternal soul. And there are certain things that are mine eternally. Silence is mine. That true spiritual love is mine. Bliss is mine. And I watch the vibrations of silence, love, and bliss spread from the seed of the soul through the brain into the spine and the rest of the sense organs. Because it's very unusual for the body. It's very unusual for the mind. The energy inside the body and the mind are of seeking these things. But the vibration, the message that I, the soul, give is that I am these things. Let's create a thought and hold that thought. I am eternal silence. I am eternal silence. Stretch that thought. Hold that thought. Stretch it a bit more. And think about the ancientness of that silence. Am eternal love. Hold that thought. Stretch that thought. Hold that thought again. And think about what ancient love feels like. The love of the golden age sits inside of you. The love of the Supreme Soul sits inside of you. I am eternal bliss. Hold that thought. Stretch that thought. Do it again. Think about that original bliss of the soul. Not a bliss that's acquired. This is the bliss that is originally inside of the soul. As you look at your soul, watch these three rivers of energy flow right throughout your body. The energy of eternal silence, the energy of eternal love, and the energy of eternal bliss. And it will be very unusual for your body and your mind, because for so many centuries, they've been seeking temporary fulfillment. And this is something very different. Baba said to us last Sunday, can you see the crown of light and might flowing throughout your forehead, throughout your being? You invite Babdada to come and sit in front of you. He is the ocean of silence, the ocean of love, the ocean of bliss. And you exchange very sweet, powerful drishti. He is the ocean, and you are the river. Both of you connect with eternal bliss. Babdada has very powerful vibrations of light and might. And as you look at Babdada and see how he has the whole world in his vision, he is supporting all souls. And it makes us unlimited as well. Baba is the ocean of silence. I am eternal silence. Let's hold that thought. Baba is the ocean of love. I am eternal love. Let's hold that thought. Baba is the ocean of bliss. I am eternal bliss. Let's hold that thought. Silence, love, and bliss. I appreciate Babdada in front of me, spreading rays of these three onto my face, into my heart. And through the day, this is a nice practice, just having Baba in front of me. And every time I look at Baba, I'm reminded who I am. Shanti. Would anyone like to share any reflections on the meditation?
It was quite powerful. And actually here, the place and the surrounding went into complete stillness. Very, very still. You know? I found that was amazing. The dog was starting again. That was completely still. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, you're generating a silence so others respond.
Good to see you, Ranjan Ben. I was gonna ask brother where you were. I came in.
Sorry, I was a bit late in getting ready today.
I came in a few minutes late.
Do you want to share?
I just shared this. I enjoyed it as well.
So, everyone, let's just carry on practicing our yoga, because a lot of yoga is training our mind. And even though we know from Baba's knowledge that we're peaceful, we're loveful, we got all these qualities inside of the soul, the mind has become disconnected from them. And between the mind and all these qualities is the accumulation of so many different memories and burdens and experiences and trauma. And it's only if we give ourselves time. We have to really sit and practice our meditation. And it's worth it. It's worth giving ourselves that time, because the main purpose of this life is to transform our inner consciousness. As Baba always says to us, that actually the greatest treasures are your treasures that are intangible, like thoughts, feelings, virtues, powers. These things are more valuable than physical treasures. And we give so much time to the physical things that we got to do. Knowledge is, of course, our foundation, and we must study the morally. But then sometimes we can all be guilty of not giving ourselves enough time to sit in yoga. And we need to maybe block off some time to really give ourselves that opportunity to practice. Sometimes, even if we've got 30 minutes in the evening, 30, 45 minutes in the morning, it's not enough. We actually need to give ourselves some real quality hours. I can remember once there was a message from Baba, where Baba even said that you should try and block off half a day a week to practice your yoga. And like if Sunday is your holiday day, to actually just block that off. And that's the way in which you're going to be able to do this. So I would encourage everyone, give yourself time to just practice yoga. Your mind might also begin to feel guilty. Like, oh, you sit in yoga, oh, I really got to do that. I really should be doing this. You'll sit in yoga, you'll remember everything you got to do, everything you haven't done. But what will you, the soul, take with you? You know, the house and things, they will still be there even after you left the body. But you'll be taking with you this yoga power. You'll be taking with you these spiritual treasures. As Baba is saying, what don't you want to take with you as well? You don't want to take your burdens with you. You don't want to take the old sanskars with you. So Baba's found a method which does both. It accumulates and it erases. So let's give ourselves time. When I was starting my practice, I did it 10 hours per day. Can you believe it? I used my entire summer vacation when I was at school. I sat in yoga 10 hours per day. And I read 10 Murlis per day. And I did that for 10 weeks. And you can see it's helped me now. You know, it's still helping me. It's worth it. And then my times in Madhuban, like when you first go to Madhuban, you sort of attend everything. You just go to every class and everything. And then over the years, you become more selective about what you attend. So I then used to prioritize sitting in yoga a lot. And I used to always get up at 1:30 and I would sit from 2 o'clock until approximately 5:30. And last time I was in Madhavan, I was in Panda Bhavan, and they'd asked me also to conduct the meditation before the Morali. So I would get up at 5:30, maybe have a cup of tea, stretch a bit, and then be on the Gadi at 6 until 7. Shanti Bhavan. Then after the Morali, while everyone's going to get breakfast, I'll go back into Baba's room for 30 minutes. Just reflect on the Morali, then go and have breakfast, and then I would rest. So I've been sitting 2 o'clock till approximately about 6 hours in the morning, and then I'd rest, and then after lunch I would sit 1:30 until 8. Yeah. So you can see I was really giving myself time. And it was in the actual Baba's room. So it had that. Baba spoke about this the other day, didn't he? The other Sunday, that the yoga Brahma Baba had back in the day, it's still filled inside of that land. And you find it much easier to transform and to remember Baba in that land. So there was a special transformative power of Baba's room in Panda Bhavan that I wanted to make the most of. So I just spent nearly my whole time in there. And then, of course, if one of the senior daddies are giving class, I would attend that. But I look back and I gave myself a lot of time. And of course, we can always give ourselves more time. But I can see how that's really helped me now as well. So that would be, again, my recommendation to everyone. And we can't always do that all the time, but think about when you can join a retreat somewhere. Brahma Baba always liked retreats. So give yourself some special time like that. And then if you can't do that, think about how you could give yourself extra time at home as well, and give yourself space to be able to do that. Or if you have a center near to you, if they're available to go and sit in Baba's room for an extra hour or two, that's a good way of doing that. Get out of your atmosphere, go into the center's atmosphere, practice your yoga. So we can always be action conscious, but give ourselves time for yoga. Okay, we'll stop there. And thank you, those of you who are here live. And again, we had a very rich discussion. If any of you are joining in late, I'm sure you'll catch up later through the video. I think it was quite an important topic about not taking sorrow, not giving sorrow, and quite a detailed discussion. But then ultimately, the second half today was about yoga, because that's the solution to everything, isn't it? So let's develop that as well. So have a good week, everyone.
See you.
Shanti.
Shanti. Bye-bye. Beautiful week to you too.
Om Shanti.